The year is 1991. A German couple hiking through the Ötztal Alps makes a discovery that will shake archaeology to its core. Jutting from the melting ice, they spot what looks like a piece of leather. But as they investigate further, they realize they're staring at something impossible. A perfectly preserved human body, complete with clothing, tools and equipment that shouldn't exist. This is Ötzi the Iceman, and he's been frozen in time for over 5,000 years. But here's what makes your spine tingle. His gear is far more sophisticated than anything we thought possible for the Stone Age. Ötzi carried a copper axe with a wooden handle so perfectly balanced that modern craftsmen struggle to replicate it. His clothing was a masterpiece of engineering, multiple layers designed for extreme weather survival, stitched with techniques that wouldn't look out of place in a modern outdoor gear catalogue. His arrows were fletched with precision that would make a NASA engineer jealous. And his backpack? It used a wooden frame system that sporting goods companies didn't invent until the 20th century. But wait, it gets stranger, much stranger. What if I told you that Ötzi might not be an anomaly? What if he's actually evidence of something we've been blind to for centuries? What if advanced technology didn't just emerge with the Industrial Revolution, but has been rising and falling throughout human history like waves on an endless shore? Welcome to a mystery that will make you question everything you thought you knew about our past. I'm about to take you on a journey through time, where we'll uncover evidence that sophisticated civilizations might have thrived during the last ice age, and their technology didn't just disappear. It evolved, adapted, and some of it might still be hidden in plain sight today. Over the next several videos, we're going to dive deep into archaeological discoveries that mainstream science struggles to explain. We'll explore ancient sites that seem to defy the timeline of human development. We'll examine artifacts that suggest our ancestors possessed knowledge we're only now beginning to understand. And we'll ask the question that keeps archaeologists awake at night. What if we've been dramatically underestimating the capabilities of ancient civilizations? But first, let me set the stage with a story that will make you reconsider everything you think you know about the Stone Age. Picture this. It's 12,000 years ago. The world is a frozen wasteland. Massive ice sheets stretch across continents like white scars on the Earth's surface. Most of what we now call Europe and North America lies buried under glaciers miles thick. The sea levels are 400 feet lower than today, exposing vast landmasses that are now underwater. This is the peak of the last ice age, a time when survival should have been humanity's only concern. According to traditional archaeology, our ancestors during this period were simple hunter-gatherers. They lived in caves, wore animal skins, and spent their days focused on one thing: not dying. They had stone tools, maybe some basic wooden spears, and that was about it. The story goes that complex civilization didn't emerge until around 6,000 years ago, with the rise of Mesopotamia and Egypt. But what if that story is completely wrong? What if, while ice sheets dominated the northern hemisphere, sophisticated civilizations were thriving in ice-free regions? What if they developed technologies that we're only now rediscovering? And what if, when the ice began to melt and sea levels rose, these civilizations didn't just disappear? They adapted, migrated, and seeded the sudden emergence of complex societies around the world? This isn't just wild speculation. There's evidence, real, tangible, mind-bending evidence that suggests our textbook understanding of human development needs a complete rewrite. Let's start with something that should be impossible: precision stone cutting that rivals modern machinery. In the mountains of Peru, there's a place called Sacsayhuaman. Now, mainstream archaeology tells us this fortress was built by the Inca around 500 years ago. But here's the problem. The Inca themselves told Spanish conquistadors that they didn't build the oldest parts of these structures. They said they found them already there, built by a people so ancient that even their grandparents' had no memory of them. The stones at Sacsayhuaman aren't just big, they're impossibly precise. We're talking about granite blocks weighing up to 200 tons, cut and fitted together so perfectly that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar was used. These stones are held together purely by their incredible precision fit. The surfaces are so smooth they feel almost polished, and the angles are so exact that they've survived centuries of earthquakes in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. But here's where it gets really interesting. The tool marks on these stones don't match anything the Inca possessed. In fact, they don't match anything any known ancient civilization possessed. Some researchers have suggested that the only way to achieve this level of precision would be with diamond-tipped tools or even laser cutting technology. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lasers in ancient Peru? Come on. But stay with me, because Sacsayhuaman isn't the only place where we find this impossible stonework. In Egypt, the granite boxes inside the Serapeum of Saqqara display the same mind-bending precision. These massive granite sarcophagi, each weighing 70 tons, are cut with tolerances that barely vary by a few thousandths of an inch. The corners are perfect right angles, and the surfaces are so flat that when you place a precision straight edge across them, there's no deviation whatsoever. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist with decades of experience in aerospace manufacturing, has studied these artifacts extensively. His conclusion: the level of precision displayed in these ancient granite works exceeds what most modern machine shops can achieve. We're talking about tolerances that would be challenging even with today's computer-controlled machinery. But it's not just the precision that's puzzling, it's the scale and the logistics. How do you move 200-ton stones up a mountainside? How do you position them with millimeter accuracy? How do you achieve surface finishes that would make a modern machinist proud? The traditional answer is that ancient people had lots of time and lots of workers. But time and workers alone don't explain precision. Precision requires technology. It requires tools. It requires knowledge of engineering principles that we supposedly didn't develop until the modern era. And here's where the Ice Age connection becomes crucial. What if these impossible stoneworks aren't from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago? What if they're much, much older? What if they're remnants of technologies that developed during the Ice Age, when civilization had to become incredibly sophisticated just to survive? Think about it logically. If you're living in a world dominated by ice and extreme weather, you don't have the luxury of building with mud bricks or simple stone stacking. You need structures that can withstand incredible forces. You need precision engineering. You need to maximize the efficiency of every calorie spent and every hour worked, because survival margins are razor thin. In such an environment, wouldn't it make sense that humans might develop incredibly sophisticated techniques for working with stone? Wouldn't they be forced to innovate ways to create structures that could last millennia? But the evidence goes beyond just stonework. There are artifacts scattered around the world that suggest ancient peoples possessed knowledge we're only now beginning to understand. Take the Antikythera mechanism, for instance. This bronze device, recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, has been called the world's first computer. Dating to around 100 BCE, it's a complex gear-driven machine that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy. The level of mechanical sophistication displayed in this device wasn't seen again in Europe until the development of astronomical clocks in the 14th century. But here's the kicker. The Antikythera mechanism isn't unique. It's just the only one that survived because it was protected by the sea. Ancient texts reference similar devices, suggesting that this level of mechanical complexity was more common than we realize. Or consider the Baghdad Battery, a collection of artifacts from Mesopotamia that appear to be galvanic cells capable of producing electrical current. While their actual purpose is debated, the fact remains that someone 2,000 years ago understood the principles of electrochemistry well enough to create working batteries. Then there's the Roman concrete that's still standing after 2,000 years while modern concrete crumbles after decades. Analysis has revealed that Roman engineers used a specific type of volcanic ash that creates a self-healing concrete that actually gets stronger over time when exposed to seawater. We only figured out how they did this in the last few years. These aren't isolated anomalies. They're part of a pattern that suggests ancient civilizations possessed knowledge that got lost, forgotten, or deliberately suppressed over time. But what if the real treasure trove of ancient technology isn't in the artifacts we've found, but in the ones we haven't? What if the most sophisticated examples of Ice Age technology are still buried under miles of ice, or lying on the ocean floor under 400 feet of water? This is where things get really exciting. As our planet continues to warm and ice sheets retreat, we're starting to uncover things that shouldn't exist. Sophisticated structures emerging from melting glaciers, underwater ruins that date to when those areas were dry land, archaeological sites that push back the timeline of human civilization by thousands of years. In Siberia, melting permafrost is revealing preserved organic materials that date back tens of thousands of years. In some cases, these materials show evidence of sophisticated preservation techniques that we thought were only developed much later in human history. Off the coast of India, marine archaeologists have discovered the remains of what appears to be a large city, now submerged under 120 feet of water. Carbon dating of materials from the site suggests it was last above water, around 12,000 years ago, right at the end of the last ice age. Similar discoveries are being made around the world. Underwater structures off the coast of Japan that appear to be artificially constructed. Megalithic sites in Turkey that date back 11,000 years, featuring stone pillars with intricate carvings that supposedly predate the development of agriculture. Each of these discoveries forces us to push back the timeline of human sophistication. Each one suggests that our ancestors were capable of much more than we've given them credit for. But here's what really keeps me up at night. What if these discoveries are just the tip of the iceberg? What if the reason we don't have more evidence of Ice Age technology isn't because it didn't exist, but because it was so advanced that it left traces we don't know how to recognize? Think about it this way. If our civilization collapsed tomorrow and future archaeologists tried to piece together our technology 10,000 years from now, what would they find? Our electronics would be long gone. Silicon chips don't survive millennia. Our plastics might leave some chemical traces, but good luck figuring out what a smartphone was from polymer residue. The things that would survive would be the most basic, durable items: stone tools, pottery, maybe some metal objects if they were lucky. Future archaeologists might conclude that we were a primitive civilization that never progressed beyond basic metallurgy. But what if Ice Age civilizations faced the same preservation bias? What if they developed technologies using materials that simply don't survive in the archaeological record? Organic compounds, crystalline structures, bioengineered materials, technologies that would leave no trace after 12,000 years of environmental exposure. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider that many ancient traditions around the world speak of a time when humans possessed abilities and knowledge that were later lost. These aren't just creation myths or religious allegories, they're remarkably consistent accounts of a golden age when technology and wisdom were far more advanced than in recorded history. The Hindu concept of cyclical time describes humanity as moving through ages of declining knowledge and capability. The Greek myth of Atlantis speaks of an advanced civilization that possessed technologies beyond anything in the ancient world. Native American traditions across multiple tribes tell of star people who brought advanced knowledge to early humans. What if these stories aren't myths at all? What if they're cultural memories of real civilizations that thrived during the Ice Age and either disappeared or went into hiding when the world changed? This brings us to perhaps the most intriguing possibility of all. What if some of this ancient technology didn't disappear? What if it evolved, adapted, and survived in forms we don't recognize? Human intuition runs deep. We think of clouds as light and airy, but a typical cumulus cloud weighs about as much as 100 elephants. Human intuition runs deep. We think of clouds as light and airy, but a typical cumulus cloud weighs about as much as 100 elephants. Similarly, we think of ancient technology as primitive and simple. But what if we're just looking at it wrong? What if the sophisticated understanding of acoustics demonstrated by ancient amphitheatres represents the remnants of a much more advanced knowledge of sound manipulation? What if the precision astronomy encoded in monuments like Stonehenge and the pyramids reflects a level of mathematical and observational sophistication that we're only now beginning to appreciate? What if the reason certain traditional techniques seem to work like magic is because they're based on scientific principles that we've lost and are only now rediscovering? We're living in an age of incredible archaeological discovery. Ground-penetrating radar is revealing buried structures without excavation. LiDAR is uncovering entire cities hidden beneath jungle canopies. Underwater archaeology is exploring submerged landscapes that were last dry during the Ice Age. Every year brings new discoveries that push back the boundaries of what we thought possible for ancient civilizations. Every year we find evidence that our ancestors were more sophisticated, more knowledgeable, and more technologically advanced than we previously believed. But we're just getting started. The real revelations are still to come. In the next part of this series, we're going to dive deep into specific technologies that might have survived from the Ice Age. We'll explore the evidence for advanced metallurgy, precision optics, and even possible energy generation systems that ancient civilizations might have developed. We'll look at sites around the world where the archaeology simply doesn't match the official timeline, and we'll examine the implications of what these discoveries might mean for our understanding of human history. We'll also investigate the controversial possibility that some ancient sites might represent technology so advanced that we're still trying to figure out how they work. From the perfectly balanced stones of ancient temples to the mysterious properties of certain megalithic sites, we'll explore evidence that our ancestors might have understood forces and principles that we're only now beginning to rediscover. But more than that, we'll ask the big question. If advanced technology did survive the Ice Age, where is it now? How might it have evolved? And what does this mean for our future? The story of human civilization is far stranger and more complex than we've been taught. The evidence is mounting that we are not the first advanced civilization on this planet, and we might not be the last. The ice is melting, the secrets are emerging, and the truth about our past might be more incredible than we ever dared to imagine. Human intuition runs deep, but sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to develop the wisdom to see them clearly. The journey into our forgotten past is just beginning, and what we discover might change everything we think we know about where we came from and where we're going. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look for it. But there's something even more unsettling than the possibility that Ice Age technology existed. It's the systematic way certain discoveries have been ignored, dismissed, or quietly buried by mainstream academia. Let me tell you about the Coso artifact. In 1961, 3 rockhounds were searching for geodes in the Coso Mountains of California when they found something that shouldn't exist. Inside what appeared to be a 500,000-year-old geode, they discovered what looked like a modern spark plug. X-rays revealed a metallic core surrounded by ceramic, with what appeared to be a threaded metal shaft. The discoverers contacted experts, hoping for an explanation. Instead, they were met with silence. Museums refused to examine it. Universities declined to study it. The artifact simply vanished from academic discourse, dismissed as a hoax despite the fact that no one could explain how such a hoax could have been perpetrated. This pattern repeats itself over and over. Artifacts that don't fit, artifacts. The accepted timeline get labelled as anomalies, outliers, or frauds. Sites that suggest advanced ancient technology are either avoided by researchers or explained away with increasingly convoluted theories that strain credibility. Why? Because acknowledging these discoveries would require rewriting textbooks, reconsidering fundamental assumptions, and admitting that we might have been wrong about the entire trajectory of human development. But the evidence keeps accumulating anyway. In the 1930s, archaeologist Michael Cremo documented hundreds of artifacts found in geological contexts that placed them millions of years before humans were supposed to exist, according to conventional theory. Perfectly crafted metal spheres found in South African mines dating back 2.8 billion years, human footprints preserved in limestone that formed 290 million years ago, tool marks on bones that predate the supposed evolution of tool-making species by millions of years. Each discovery was met with the same response: ignore it, explain it away, or attack the credibility of those who reported it. This institutional resistance to paradigm-shifting discoveries isn't new. When Alfred Wegener proposed continental drift in 1912, he was ridiculed by the geological establishment for decades. When Galileo suggested that Earth wasn't the centre of the universe, he was forced to recant under threat of execution. History is littered with examples of revolutionary ideas being suppressed simply because they challenged the status quo. But here's what makes the Ice Age technology question different. The implications go far beyond academic theory. If advanced civilizations existed before recorded history, it means we're not the first. It means technological progress isn't linear. It means civilizations can rise and fall, leaving barely a trace. And if that's true, it raises some uncomfortable questions about our own future. Look around you right now. Everything you see, your phone, your computer, the building you're in, represents the culmination of thousands of years of technological development. We tend to think of this progress as inevitable, as a straight line from primitive to advanced. But what if it's not? What if technological civilization is more fragile than we imagine? What if the normal state of humanity is actually much simpler, and what we call civilization is just a brief flowering that occurs under very specific conditions? The geological record shows that Earth has experienced numerous catastrophic events that could have wiped out advanced civilizations: massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, rapid climate changes, magnetic pole reversals. Any one of these could have sent a technological society back to the Stone Age in a matter of decades. And here's the terrifying part. We know these events will happen again. It's not a matter of if, but when. The Yellowstone supervolcano is overdue for an eruption that would plunge the world into nuclear winter. The magnetic poles are already shifting, potentially exposing us to deadly cosmic radiation. Climate change is accelerating beyond our ability to control it. Asteroid impacts remain a constant threat. If any of these scenarios played out tomorrow, how much of our technology would survive for future archaeologists to find 12,000 years from now? Our electronics would be gone within decades. Our cities would crumble and be reclaimed by nature within centuries. Our plastic pollution might leave chemical traces, but good luck figuring out what an iPhone was from polymer residue in sedimentary rock. Future archaeologists might find our stone monuments, Mount Rushmore, the pyramids, Stonehenge, and conclude that we were a primitive civilization that never progressed beyond basic stonework. They might discover our bronze and iron artifacts and place us in their own version of the Bronze and Iron Ages. The most sophisticated aspects of our technology, quantum computers, genetic engineering, satellite networks, would leave no trace whatsoever. This preservation bias means that if Ice Age civilizations did exist, we would expect to find exactly what we do find: scattered remnants of their most durable technologies, mysterious stone structures built with impossible precision, and oral traditions that preserve dim memories of more advanced times. But there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if some Ice Age technologies didn't just survive? What if they were deliberately preserved? Ancient traditions around the world speak of secret knowledge, hidden schools, and mystery traditions that preserve wisdom from earlier ages. The Egyptian mystery schools claim to possess knowledge dating back to the time of the gods. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of hidden teachings preserved in secret monasteries. Indigenous shamanic traditions worldwide claim to maintain connections to ancient wisdom. What if these aren't just mystical beliefs? What if they represent actual preservation systems designed to maintain technological knowledge through periods of civilizational collapse? Consider how this might work. If you knew that a catastrophe was coming that would destroy technological civilization, how would you preserve the most important knowledge for future generations? You couldn't rely on books or digital storage. Those would be lost. You couldn't depend on written language. That might be forgotten. But you could encode the information in stories, songs, and rituals. You could build it into oral traditions that would be passed down through generations. You could hide it in plain sight within religious practices, mathematical concepts, and architectural designs. This is exactly what we see in ancient traditions. Mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio embedded in sacred architecture. Astronomical knowledge preserved in mythological stories. Advanced metallurgical techniques disguised as alchemical practices. The more you look, the more you realize that ancient cultures were obsessed with preservation. They built monuments designed to last millennia. They encoded information in multiple redundant systems. They created initiation schools specifically to maintain secret knowledge. Why would they go to such lengths unless they had something incredibly valuable to preserve? And here's where things get really interesting. Some researchers suggest that certain modern technologies might actually be rediscoveries of ancient knowledge rather than entirely new inventions. Take concrete, for example. We think of it as a modern material, but Roman concrete was actually superior to most modern formulations. It gets stronger over time, especially when exposed to seawater, while our concrete degrades. We only figured out their techniques in the last few decades. Or consider Damascus steel, renowned for its incredible sharpness and durability. The techniques for making it were lost during the Middle Ages, and we still can't perfectly replicate the original process, despite having electron microscopes and modern metallurgy. Traditional Chinese medicine uses diagnostic techniques that seem primitive until you realize they're detecting subtle physiological patterns that we're only now beginning to understand with modern sensors and data analysis. Indigenous navigation techniques that seemed like superstition have turned out to be sophisticated ways of reading ocean currents, wind patterns, and stellar positions that rival GPS in their accuracy. What if these aren't just isolated examples? What if many of our modern discoveries are actually rediscoveries of knowledge that was preserved through the dark ages between civilizations? This possibility becomes even more compelling when you consider that some of our most advanced technologies work on principles we don't fully understand. We know how to make computer chips, but we still don't completely understand quantum mechanics. We can manipulate DNA, but we're only beginning to grasp the complexity of genetic interactions. We can generate electricity, but the fundamental nature of electrical fields remains mysterious. If we don't fully understand our own technology, how can we be certain that similar or even more advanced technologies didn't exist in the past? But let's take this a step further. What if the preservation of ancient knowledge wasn't passive? What if it was active? What if there are groups that have been actively maintaining and developing Ice Age technologies for thousands of years? This isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. We know that secret societies have existed throughout history. The Knights Templar accumulated vast wealth and influence through banking techniques that were supposedly unknown in medieval Europe. The Freemasons preserve architectural and mathematical knowledge in their rituals that dates back to ancient times. Tibetan monasteries maintain practices that seem to demonstrate unusual abilities that science is only beginning to investigate. What if these organizations aren't just social clubs or religious groups? What if they're preservation societies, designed to maintain knowledge through the rise and fall of civilizations? And what if they're not just preserving knowledge? What if they're actively using it? Consider the precision with which ancient monuments were built, the mathematical constants encoded in their proportions, the astronomical alignments that remain accurate across millennia. These aren't just impressive artifacts, they're functional technologies. Many ancient sites demonstrate acoustic properties that seem deliberately engineered. Chichen Itza's pyramid produces a chirping echo that matches the call of the quetzal bird. The chambers beneath the pyramids of Giza resonate at specific frequencies that induce altered states of consciousness. Stonehenge channels sound waves in ways that amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. What if these aren't accidents? What if ancient builders understood acoustic engineering at a level we're only now beginning to appreciate? Some researchers have suggested that certain ancient sites might have been designed as acoustic healing centers, using sound frequencies to promote physical and mental health. Others propose that they functioned as consciousness-altering devices, using resonance to induce specific mental states. These ideas might sound like New Age nonsense, but modern science is discovering that sound frequencies do have measurable effects on human physiology and consciousness. Certain frequencies can promote healing, reduce stress, and even alter brainwave patterns. If ancient builders understood these principles, they could have created structures that functioned as sophisticated medical and psychological technologies using nothing but precisely shaped stone and an understanding of acoustic physics. But the implications go even further. What if the real secret of Ice Age technology isn't in the artifacts we've found, but in the knowledge systems that created them? What if ancient civilizations developed ways of thinking, learning, and problem-solving that were fundamentally different from our approach? What if they accessed forms of intelligence that we've forgotten how to use? Modern education focuses on analytical thinking, breaking problems down into component parts and solving them step by step. But indigenous traditions worldwide speak of holistic thinking, intuitive problem-solving, and direct perception of natural patterns. What if these aren't just different cultural approaches, but actually different technologies of consciousness? What if ancient peoples developed mental techniques that allowed them to perceive and manipulate reality in ways we can't imagine? This might explain how they achieved impossible precision without modern tools. It might explain how they moved massive stones without advanced machinery. It might explain how they encoded complex mathematical and astronomical knowledge without written calculation systems. If consciousness itself can be developed as a technology, then the limits of what's possible become much more flexible. And that brings us to the most profound question of all. What if Ice Age technology didn't disappear because it was destroyed, but because we lost the ability to perceive it? What if it's still here, all around us, waiting for us to develop the consciousness to see it clearly? The melting ice is revealing more than just artifacts and ruins. It's revealing the possibility that human potential is far greater than we've been taught, that our ancestors achieved things we can barely imagine, and that the technologies they developed might still be accessible to us if we're willing to expand our understanding of what technology can be. The question isn't just whether ancient technology survived the Ice Age. The question is whether we're ready to recognize it when we see it. Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most advanced technology is the one that works in harmony with natural principles rather than against them. Sometimes, the most sophisticated solution is the one that seems impossibly simple. The ice is melting, the secrets are emerging, and the greatest discovery might not be what we find in the ground, but what we discover within ourselves. The story of human potential is far from over. In fact, it might just be beginning. But there's something even more unsettling than the possibility that advanced technology once existed and was lost. It's the growing evidence that we might be living through the same cycle right now, making the same mistakes, heading toward the same fate as those forgotten civilizations. Let me paint you a picture that will make your blood run cold. Imagine you're an archaeologist from the year 15,000 CE, excavating what used to be called New York City. The sea levels have risen and fallen multiple times. Ice ages have come and gone. The surface is buried under hundreds of feet of sediment deposited by countless floods and geological upheavals. You dig down through the layers, finding scattered remnants of a civilization that once thrived here. Some corroded metal fragments, traces of concrete foundations, maybe a few ceramic artifacts. Based on these limited remains, you conclude that the people who lived here were a primitive society that never progressed beyond basic metallurgy and stone construction. You write papers about these early urban dwellers who built simple stone structures and worked with crude metals. Your colleagues nod approvingly. The timeline makes sense. Everything fits the accepted model of gradual technological progression. But what you can't see, what no amount of excavation could reveal, is that these people once carried devices more powerful than supercomputers in their pockets. They sent signals instantly across the globe through invisible networks. They manipulated matter at the atomic level. They had machines that could think and learn. They were on the verge of extending human life indefinitely and colonizing other planets. All of that technology, the most sophisticated achievements of an entire civilization, left no trace that you could recognize or understand. This is the preservation bias problem taken to its logical extreme, and it should terrify us because it means we could be dramatically wrong about everything we think we know about the past. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. What if this cycle has happened not once but multiple times? What if the Earth has seen the rise and fall of numerous advanced civilizations, each one believing they were the first, each one leaving only the most primitive traces for future archaeologists to find? The geological record shows that our planet has experienced regular catastrophic events every 12,000 to 13,000 years. The last major event coincides almost exactly with the end of the Ice Age and the mysterious disappearance of megafauna worldwide. The next one is mathematically due within the next few centuries. These aren't gradual changes. They're rapid, civilization-ending catastrophes that reset the entire biosphere. Solar flares that destroy electrical grids, magnetic pole reversals that strip away atmospheric protection, asteroid impacts that trigger years of nuclear winter, supervolcanic eruptions that plunge the world into decades of darkness. Any one of these events could send our technological civilization back to the Stone Age within a single generation. The survivors would be too busy staying alive to maintain knowledge of quantum physics or semiconductor manufacturing. Within a few hundred years, our greatest achievements would be forgotten. Within a few thousand years, they'd be myths. Within 12,000 years, they'd leave barely any archaeological trace at all. And then the cycle would begin again. The survivors would slowly rebuild, rediscover agriculture, develop writing, create new technologies, all while walking past the incomprehensible ruins of their predecessors, dismissing them as the work of primitive ancient peoples. This cyclical model of civilization explains so many mysteries that the linear progression model can't account for. Why do we find evidence of sophisticated technology appearing suddenly in the archaeological record without clear developmental phases? Why do ancient monuments demonstrate precision that seems impossible for their supposed time periods? Why do traditional cultures worldwide preserve stories of golden ages followed by catastrophic destruction? Because it's not mythology, it's history repeating itself. But if this is true, it raises an absolutely chilling question. Are we approaching the end of our own cycle? Look at the signs. Climate systems are destabilizing faster than any models predicted. The magnetic field is weakening and showing signs of an imminent reversal. Solar activity is increasing. Asteroid detection systems are revealing just how many near misses we experience regularly. Yellowstone's seismic activity is increasing. Ocean currents that regulate global weather patterns are slowing down. We're living in a house of cards and we don't even realize it. Our entire technological infrastructure depends on electrical grids that could be wiped out by a single large solar flare. Our global food system relies on transportation networks that could be disrupted by a single major volcanic eruption. Our economic systems are so interconnected that a collapse in one region could trigger worldwide chaos within days. We think we're more advanced than any previous civilization, but we might actually be more fragile. Our ancestors had skills that could keep them alive without technology. How many people today could survive for a week without electricity? How many could grow their own food, purify their own water, or navigate without GPS? We've traded resilience for efficiency, and that trade-off might be our downfall. But here's the truly mind-bending part. What if some groups have figured this out? What if there are people who understand the cyclical nature of civilization and have been preparing for the next reset? Think about it logically. If you knew that technological civilization was destined to collapse every 12,000 years, and you had access to advanced knowledge, what would you do? You'd create preservation systems. You'd establish hidden archives. You'd train select groups to maintain critical knowledge through the Dark Ages. You'd do exactly what ancient mystery schools claim to be doing, preserving wisdom for future generations. And you'd probably do it in secret, because telling people that their entire way of life is temporary and doomed wouldn't exactly be popular. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the Ice Age technology question: the possibility that some advanced knowledge has been deliberately hidden, not just preserved. Throughout history, there have been persistent rumors of secret societies possessing knowledge far beyond what was publicly available. The Knights Templar supposedly discovered something beneath Solomon's temple that gave them incredible power and wealth. Medieval alchemists claimed to possess secrets of transmutation and immortality. Renaissance artists and architects seemed to understand mathematical and engineering principles that weren't officially discovered until centuries later. What if these weren't just rumors and superstitions? What if they were glimpses of a hidden knowledge preservation system that has been operating throughout recorded history? Consider the Vatican Secret Archives, which contain documents spanning over 1,000 years. The Chinese Imperial Archives, which preserve technological and scientific knowledge for millennia. The Library of Alexandria, which supposedly contained the collected wisdom of the ancient world before its destruction. These weren't just libraries. They were knowledge preservation systems designed to maintain critical information through periods of social upheaval and civilizational collapse. But what if there are similar systems that are still operating today? What if there are groups that possess technologies derived from Ice Age civilizations, kept secret not out of greed or power hunger, but out of a recognition that humanity isn't ready for certain capabilities? This might sound like conspiracy theory nonsense, but consider the evidence. Military research programs routinely develop technologies decades ahead of what's publicly available. Corporate research divisions create innovations that are shelved for years or decades before being released. Government agencies classify information that could revolutionize entire industries. If relatively modern institutions can successfully hide advanced technologies, why couldn't much older institutions do the same thing on a longer timescale? And here's what really keeps me awake at night. What if they're right to hide it? What if the reason Ice Age civilizations collapsed wasn't just because of natural catastrophes, but because they developed technologies they couldn't control? What if they created artificial intelligence that turned against them? What if they manipulated genetic codes in ways that destroyed their ecosystems? What if they harnessed energy sources that proved too dangerous to contain? We're rushing headlong toward the same precipice. We're developing AI systems we don't understand. We're editing genes with techniques we're still learning. We're manipulating quantum fields and subatomic particles with consequences we can't predict. What if the hidden knowledge keepers understand something we don't? That certain technologies are inherently civilization-ending? That there are discoveries so dangerous they should never be made public? That the only way to preserve human civilization long-term is to carefully control the pace and direction of technological development? This possibility becomes even more disturbing when you consider that we might be on the verge of rediscovering some of these dangerous technologies through our own research. Quantum computing, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, we're approaching capabilities that could fundamentally transform human existence or destroy it entirely. And if Ice Age civilizations went down this path before, the people who preserved their knowledge would know exactly where it leads. But there's another possibility that's simultaneously more hopeful and more terrifying. What if the goal isn't to hide dangerous technologies, but to prepare humanity for the next phase of development? What if the cyclical destruction of civilizations isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature? What if it's a natural process that serves a purpose we don't understand yet? Consider this. Every time civilization collapses and rebuilds, it comes back slightly different. Different cultures, different approaches to problem solving, different relationships with technology and nature. What if this diversity is crucial for long-term human survival? What if the universe itself is running an experiment, testing different approaches to consciousness and technology across multiple cycles of civilization? What if each collapse and rebuilding is an iteration in a vast evolutionary process designed to eventually produce a form of human civilization that can transcend the cycle entirely? From this perspective, Ice Age technology wouldn't just be about preserving knowledge, it would be about guiding human development toward an ultimate goal. The secret societies wouldn't be hiding dangerous technologies, they'd be carefully seeding new ideas into each cycle of civilization, nudging humanity toward a destiny we can't yet comprehend. This would explain why certain breakthrough technologies seem to appear simultaneously in multiple places, as if the ideas were being deliberately introduced into human consciousness. It would explain why some innovations seem to come from nowhere, without clear developmental precursors. It would explain why certain mathematical and scientific principles keep being rediscovered in different cultures across different time periods. And it would mean that we're not just random survivors of a cosmic accident. We're participants in a vast, multi-generational project whose ultimate purpose might be to create a form of human civilization that can survive indefinitely and eventually spread beyond Earth. But if that's true, it raises the ultimate question. Are we ready for graduation? Are we approaching the point where human civilization can finally break free from the cycle of rise and collapse? Or are we about to repeat the same mistakes that have doomed every previous attempt? The signs are mixed. On one hand, we're developing technologies that could potentially allow us to survive global catastrophes, space colonization, underground cities, genetic preservation techniques, renewable energy systems that don't depend on fragile infrastructure. On the other hand, we're also developing technologies that could make the next collapse even more complete. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, artificial intelligence that could turn against us, genetic modifications that could destabilize entire ecosystems. We're at a crossroads, and the choices we make in the next few decades might determine whether humanity finally transcends the cycle or falls back into another dark age. But here's the thing that gives me hope. We're having this conversation. We're asking these questions. We're beginning to recognize that our current path might not be sustainable, and that there might be wisdom in the past that could guide us toward a better future. The melting ice is revealing more than just artifacts and ruins. It's revealing that human potential is far greater than we've been taught, that our ancestors achieved things we're only beginning to understand, and that the future might hold possibilities we can't yet imagine. The question isn't just whether ancient technology survived the Ice Age. The question is whether we'll survive to see what comes next. And that depends on whether we're wise enough to learn from the past instead of just repeating it. The ice keeps melting. The secrets keep emerging. And time keeps ticking toward whatever comes next in the grand cycle of human civilization. Are you ready to find out what that might be? The evidence I'm about to show you will make you question whether we're actually the most advanced civilization that's ever existed on this planet. Because what if I told you that right now, hidden in plain sight, there are technologies operating around us that use principles we supposedly only discovered in the last century? Let me start with something that should be impossible according to our timeline of human development. In the mountains of Lebanon stands a temple complex called Baalbek. The Romans built elaborate structures on top of it, sure, but the foundation stones, the massive megaliths that everything else sits on, those are a completely different story. We're talking about the trilithon, 3 stone blocks that each weigh over 800 tons. 800 tons. That's heavier than 400 cars stacked on top of each other. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-bending. There's another stone in the nearby quarry called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman that weighs 1,200 tons. It was cut, shaped and prepared for transport but never moved. Modern cranes can barely lift 800 tons under perfect conditions with steel cables and hydraulic systems. How do you move 1,200 tons of carved limestone without leaving any evidence of the technology used to do it? The official explanation is ramps, ropes, and thousands of workers. But engineering analysis shows that even with unlimited human labour, moving stones this massive would require leverage systems and materials that simply didn't exist in the ancient world. The stress forces alone would snap any rope or wooden beam known to ancient technology, unless they had something else, something we're not seeing in the archaeological record. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. These impossible megalithic sites aren't scattered randomly around the world. They follow patterns. They're connected by what researchers call ley lines, straight-line alignments that connect ancient sites across vast distances with mathematical precision. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Stonehenge, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat. When you plot them on a map, they form geometric relationships that seem far too precise to be coincidental. The angles between sites encode mathematical constants. The distances between them reflect astronomical measurements. It's as if these monuments were placed according to some kind of global blueprint. But here's what really makes your spine tingle. Many of these sites demonstrate unusual electromagnetic properties that we're only now beginning to measure with modern instruments. Stonehenge sits on top of an underground water system that creates a natural electromagnetic field. The stones themselves are positioned to channel and amplify these fields in specific directions. When researchers measure the electromagnetic activity at the site during certain times of year, the readings spike to levels that affect sensitive equipment. The pyramid complex at Giza shows similar properties. The internal chambers resonate at frequencies that match the electromagnetic signature of the Earth itself. It's as if these structures were designed to tap into natural planetary energies that we didn't even know existed until the development of modern sensors. And it's not just the famous sites. All over the world, ancient structures demonstrate acoustic and electromagnetic properties that suggest their builders understood principles of physics that we're only now rediscovering. In Malta, the underground hypogeum of Hal Saflieni contains chambers that amplify human voices at specific frequencies. When you speak in certain rooms, your voice resonates in ways that induce measurable changes in brain activity. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that these frequencies can alter consciousness, promote healing, and even trigger what people describe as spiritual experiences. How did ancient builders know which frequencies would affect human brain chemistry? How did they shape stone chambers to produce these exact acoustic effects? And why did they bother, unless they understood that sound could be used as a technology for influencing human consciousness? This is where the Ice Age connection becomes absolutely crucial. Because if these sites are much older than we think, if they're remnants of technologies developed during the last Ice Age, then we're looking at evidence of a scientific understanding that rivals or exceeds our own. Think about what would be required to create a global network of sites with coordinated electromagnetic and acoustic properties. You'd need precise surveying techniques to establish the geometric relationships between locations thousands of miles apart. You'd need an understanding of planetary energy fields that we're only now developing. You'd need acoustic engineering knowledge that modern architects are just beginning to appreciate. And you'd need a reason, a purpose that justified the incredible effort and coordination required to build such a system. What if these sites weren't just monuments or temples? What if they were components of a planetary technology system that we don't recognize because we're looking at it with the wrong conceptual framework? Modern research is revealing that the Earth itself generates complex electromagnetic fields that fluctuate in predictable patterns. These fields affect everything from weather systems to animal migration to human consciousness. If ancient civilizations understood these planetary energies, they could have built structures designed to interact with them in specific ways. Imagine a network of stone monuments positioned at key points around the globe, each one designed to tap into and redirect planetary energy fields. The sites would function like acupuncture points on the Earth's energy meridians, influencing global systems in ways we're only beginning to understand. This might sound like New Age mysticism, but the physics is actually quite solid. We know that electromagnetic fields can influence biological systems. We know that certain frequencies can affect brain activity. We know that the Earth generates complex energy patterns that modern science is still mapping. If Ice Age civilizations developed these insights thousands of years before us, they could have created technologies that work with natural forces rather than against them. Technologies that leave no industrial footprint because they're based on principles of resonance and harmony, rather than brute force and resource extraction. And here's the truly unsettling part. This technology might still be operating. Many ancient sites continue to demonstrate unusual properties that modern instruments can measure, but that we can't fully explain. Megalithic monuments that generate weak but detectable electrical fields, stone circles that create localized changes in magnetic readings, pyramid chambers that resonate at frequencies that affect electronic equipment. What if these aren't just remnants of ancient technology, but active systems that have been operating continuously for thousands of years? What if the reasons certain ancient sites feel different? Why people report unusual experiences at places like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid is because they're still functioning as originally designed. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when you consider that many ancient sites were built with materials specifically chosen for their electromagnetic properties. Granite contains quartz crystals that generate electrical charges under pressure. Limestone has acoustic properties that can amplify and focus sound waves. Iron-rich stones can create magnetic fields when properly arranged. Ancient builders didn't just randomly select these materials, they chose them deliberately, using combinations that create specific electromagnetic and acoustic effects. It's as if they understood the electrical properties of stone better than most modern engineers. But the real breakthrough in understanding Ice Age technology might come from recognizing that consciousness itself could be a component of these ancient systems. Modern neuroscience is discovering that human brains are incredibly sensitive to electromagnetic fields. Weak magnetic pulses can trigger specific thoughts, emotions, and even mystical experiences. Certain sound frequencies can synchronize brain waves across groups of people. Changes in atmospheric electrical activity can affect mood, creativity, and problem-solving ability. If ancient civilizations understood these connections between electromagnetic fields and consciousness, they could have built monuments that function as consciousness-influencing technologies. Sites designed to enhance human mental capabilities, promote healing, or facilitate access to what people describe as higher states of awareness. This would explain why so many ancient sites are associated with religious or spiritual experiences. It's not because they are inherently sacred, it's because they were engineered to produce specific effects on human consciousness, using principles we're only now beginning to understand. And if these technologies could enhance human mental capabilities, they might explain how ancient civilizations achieved feats that seem impossible with primitive tools. Enhanced pattern recognition could allow for precision stone cutting. Improved spatial reasoning could enable the movement of massive blocks. Heightened intuitive problem-solving could lead to engineering solutions that bypass the need for complex machinery. In other words, the real Ice Age technology might not have been external tools and machines, but internal human capabilities that were artificially enhanced through environmental manipulation. This brings us to perhaps the most profound possibility of all. What if some people today still know how to use these systems? Throughout history, there have been individuals who demonstrated capabilities that seem to transcend normal human limitations. Architects who designed impossible structures, artists who encoded complex mathematical relationships in their work, inventors who created technologies that were far ahead of their time. What if these weren't just exceptionally gifted individuals, but people who understood how to access and utilize the consciousness-enhancing effects of ancient sites? What if the real secret of Ice Age technology isn't hidden in buried artifacts, but in knowledge of how to activate human potential using environmental energy fields? This would explain why certain locations have been considered sacred or powerful across multiple cultures and time periods. It's not because of religious beliefs or cultural traditions, it's because these sites actually do enhance human capabilities in measurable ways. And it would mean that the most advanced Ice Age technology is still accessible to us today if we're willing to expand our understanding of what technology can be. The melting ice isn't just revealing artifacts and ruins, it's revealing the possibility that human consciousness is far more malleable and powerful than we've been taught. That our ancestors developed ways of enhancing mental capabilities that we've forgotten how to use, and that the technologies they created are still operating around us, waiting for us to remember how to recognize and activate them. But here's what really keeps me awake at night. What if this technology is already being used by groups that understand its potential? What if there are people who have maintained this knowledge through the rise and fall of civilizations, who understand how to use ancient sites to enhance their own capabilities, who can access forms of problem-solving and pattern recognition that give them advantages the rest of us can't even imagine? This would explain a lot about how certain groups seem to maintain power and influence across historical periods that should have destroyed their organizations. How certain individuals seem to possess insights that are far ahead of their contemporaries. How some technologies appear to develop faster than the official timeline of discovery would suggest. If consciousness-enhancing technology survived the Ice Age, and if some groups have maintained knowledge of how to use it, then we might be living in a world where there are essentially two levels of human capability operating simultaneously, those who have access to enhanced mental technologies and those who don't. And most of us wouldn't even know which category we're in. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look for it. Ancient sites that continue to affect human consciousness. Modern technologies that seem to develop in sudden leaps rather than gradual progressions. Individuals and organizations that demonstrate capabilities that seem to transcend normal human limitations. The question isn't whether Ice Age technology survived. The question is whether we're ready to recognize it when we see it, and whether we're prepared for what that recognition might mean for our understanding of human potential and the true nature of the world we live in. The ice keeps melting, the secrets keep emerging. And the most profound discoveries might not be what we find buried in the ground, but what we find hidden within ourselves. Because if our ancestors could enhance human consciousness using environmental technologies, and if that knowledge has been preserved through thousands of years of civilizational rise and fall, then the real Ice Age technology isn't something we need to rediscover. It's something we need to remember. Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most advanced technology is the one that enhances our natural capabilities, rather than replacing them with artificial substitutes. The journey into our technological past is revealing that the future might already be here, operating in ways we never thought to look for, and that realization changes everything. But let me tell you about a discovery that happened just 5 years ago that should have made front-page news worldwide, but instead was quietly buried in academic journals where only specialists would ever see it. In 2019, researchers using ground-penetrating radar in the Amazon rainforest detected something that shouldn't exist. Beneath the jungle, canopy, they found evidence of a massive urban complex covering an area larger than Manhattan. The structures show sophisticated city planning, straight roads, organized districts, advanced water management systems. But here's what made archaeologists nervous. The organic material they were able to date suggested this city was thriving 15,000 years ago. 15,000 years ago. That's right in the middle of the Ice Age, when humans were supposedly scattered in small nomadic groups, struggling just to survive. The Discovery team submitted their findings to major archaeological journals. The response was swift and predictable. Requests for additional verification, concerns about dating methodology, suggestions that the structures were probably natural formations misinterpreted by the radar. But the team had done their homework. They'd used multiple dating techniques. They'd brought in geological experts to rule out natural formations. They'd even found evidence of sophisticated metallurgy in the few samples they could extract without major excavation. The evidence was solid. The implications were staggering, and the academic response was to quietly shelve the discovery until it could be properly contextualized within existing frameworks. Translation, until they could figure out how to explain it without rewriting textbooks. This is the pattern that repeats itself over and over when discoveries challenge our fundamental assumptions about the past. The evidence gets buried under layers of academic bureaucracy, funding restrictions, and institutional resistance to paradigm-shifting ideas. But the Amazon discovery isn't isolated. Similar findings are emerging from melting permafrost in Siberia, from underwater surveys off the coasts of India and Japan, from satellite analysis of supposed natural formations in remote areas worldwide. Each discovery pushes the timeline of sophisticated human civilization further back. Each one suggests that our ancestors were capable of achievements we've never given them credit for, and each one gets quietly suppressed or explained away to protect the established narrative. Why? Because acknowledging these discoveries would force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We might not be the first advanced civilization on this planet. We might not even be the most advanced. Think about what that means for our understanding of human potential. If Ice Age civilizations achieved technological sophistication that we're only now beginning to recognize, it suggests that human capability is far more flexible and adaptable than we've been taught. It means that the conditions we think are necessary for advanced civilization, stable climate, abundant resources, large populations, might not actually be requirements at all. It means that human ingenuity can flourish under the most extreme conditions imaginable. And it means that the technologies they develop to survive in a world of ice and scarcity might be exactly what we need to survive the challenges we're facing today. Because here's the thing that really terrifies me about our current situation. We're not just heading toward another cyclical collapse. We're heading toward a collapse that could be permanent. Previous civilizations faced natural catastrophes, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts. Devastating, yes, but ultimately temporary. The planet recovered, ecosystems rebuilt themselves, and life continued. But we're creating conditions that might not be reversible. Climate change isn't just shifting weather patterns, it's potentially triggering feedback loops that could make large portions of the planet uninhabitable for thousands of years. Nuclear contamination doesn't just kill, it renders entire regions toxic for centuries. Genetic modifications don't just affect individual species, they can cascade through entire ecosystems in unpredictable ways. We're not just risking our civilization, we're risking the habitability of the planet itself. And that's where Ice Age technology becomes more than just an archaeological curiosity, it becomes a potential lifeline. Because if ancient civilizations developed technologies that worked in harmony with natural systems rather than against them, if they found ways to thrive during planetary crisis periods, if they created sustainable approaches to energy, materials, and consciousness enhancement, then studying their methods isn't just academically interesting, it's critically urgent. But there's a problem. The very institutions that should be leading this research are the ones most invested in suppressing it. Universities depend on funding from sources that benefit from current technological paradigms. Archaeological institutions are run by people whose entire careers are built on established timelines. Government agencies classify anything that might disrupt existing power structures. The result is a systematic bias against discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of human potential and planetary stewardship. But the evidence keeps accumulating anyway, and it's starting to reach a tipping point where suppression becomes impossible. Satellite imagery is revealing geometric patterns in supposedly pristine wilderness areas worldwide. Ground-penetrating radar is detecting massive structures beneath seemingly natural formations. Ice core analysis is showing evidence of sophisticated atmospheric manipulation during periods when humans supposedly lived in caves. Each new discovery adds to a growing body of evidence that suggests human history is far stranger, far older, and far more advanced than we've been taught. And some researchers are starting to speak out despite the career risks. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a geophysicist who's spent the last decade studying electromagnetic anomalies at ancient sites, put it bluntly in a recent interview. We're looking at evidence of technologies that we don't understand, operating on principles we're only beginning to discover. The question isn't whether these technologies existed. The question is whether we're humble enough to admit that our ancestors might have been smarter than us. Her research has documented measurable energy fields at over 200 ancient sites worldwide. Fields that pulse in regular patterns, that respond to astronomical cycles, that seem to influence local weather and biological activity. When she submitted her findings to mainstream journals, the response was predictable. Requests for peer review by scientists who refused to visit the sites themselves, demands for control studies that would require funding she can't access, suggestions that she reconsider her methodology. But Dr. Martinez isn't backing down. She started publishing her research independently, sharing her data with engineers and physicists who are developing new technologies based on the principles she's discovered. And that's where things get really interesting, because some modern technologies that we think are cutting-edge innovations are actually starting to converge with principles that ancient sites demonstrate. Resonance engineering, for example. We're just now learning how to use sound waves to manipulate matter at the molecular level. But acoustic analysis of ancient chambers shows that their builders understood these principles thousands of years ago. Biomimetic materials science is teaching us to create substances that adapt and self-repair like living systems. But analysis of ancient construction techniques reveals building methods that seem to have achieved similar results using organic materials we're only now learning to appreciate. Consciousness research is discovering that human mental capabilities can be enhanced through environmental manipulation. Specific electromagnetic fields, acoustic frequencies, even particular geometric configurations. But ancient sites worldwide demonstrate that their builders understood and utilized these effects with sophisticated precision. What if we're not discovering new technologies at all? What if we're rediscovering ancient ones? And what if the reason certain breakthrough innovations seem to appear simultaneously in multiple research labs around the world isn't because of parallel development, but because information is being deliberately introduced into human consciousness by groups that have maintained Ice Age knowledge systems? This possibility becomes even more compelling when you consider that some of our most advanced technologies seem to work on principles we don't fully understand. We can manufacture quantum computers, but quantum mechanics itself remains mysterious. We can edit genes, but the full complexity of genetic interactions is still beyond our grasp. We can generate electricity, but the fundamental nature of electromagnetic fields continues to puzzle physicists. If we don't completely understand our own technologies, how can we be certain that similar or more advanced technologies didn't exist in the past? And if ancient knowledge preservation systems have been operating throughout history, how can we be sure that some of our modern discoveries aren't actually guided rediscoveries of Ice Age innovations? The implications are staggering. It would mean that human technological development isn't linear progression, but cyclical rediscovery. It would mean that the knowledge needed to solve our current crises might already exist, preserved in forms we haven't learned to recognize. And it would mean that the race isn't to invent new solutions, but to remember old ones before it's too late. But here's what gives me hope in all of this. The evidence is starting to reach ordinary people. Social media platforms are sharing images of impossible ancient structures. Independent researchers are publishing findings that mainstream institutions won't touch. Citizen scientists are using readily available technology to detect anomalies that official archaeology ignores. The gatekeepers are losing control of the narrative. The truth is starting to emerge despite institutional resistance. And that might be exactly what we need to break free from the cycle of civilizational collapse that has repeated throughout human history. Because the one thing that all previous collapses have in common is that knowledge was lost. Writing systems disappeared. Technical skills were forgotten. Scientific understanding vanished with the institutions that preserved it. But we live in an age of unprecedented information, preservation, and distribution. Digital storage systems, global communication networks, decentralized sharing platforms. For the first time in human history, knowledge can survive institutional collapse. If we can identify and preserve the crucial insights from Ice Age civilizations before our own systems fail, we might be able to break the cycle entirely. We might be able to create a form of human civilization that can survive any catastrophe. But we're running out of time. The signs of systemic instability are accelerating. Climate feedback loops are triggering faster than predicted. Economic systems are showing unprecedented fragility. Social structures are polarizing beyond the point of rational discourse. The window for preventing collapse might already be closed, but the window for surviving it might still be open, if we're wise enough to learn from those who survived it before. The melting ice is revealing more than ancient artifacts. It's revealing that human resilience and adaptability are far greater than we've imagined, that our ancestors faced challenges as severe as any we're confronting today, and not only survived, but thrived. Their technologies might seem primitive to us because we're measuring them against our own assumptions about what technology should look like. But what if the most advanced technology is the kind that enhances natural systems rather than replacing them? What if the smartest innovations are the ones that work with planetary forces rather than against them? What if the reason Ice Age civilizations survived multiple catastrophic cycles isn't because they were lucky, but because they were wise enough to develop technologies that could adapt to any conditions? The ice keeps melting, the secrets keep emerging, and the most important discovery might not be what our ancestors achieved in the past, but what they can teach us about surviving the future. Because if they could develop technologies sophisticated enough to thrive during the most challenging period in recent planetary history, then maybe, just maybe, we can too. But only if we're humble enough to admit that we might have something to learn from people we've dismissed as primitive cave dwellers. Only if we're brave enough to question everything we think we know about the trajectory of human development. And only if we're wise enough to recognize that the most advanced technology might be the one that helps us remember who we really are and what we're truly capable of achieving when our survival depends on it. The story of human potential is far from over. In fact, it might just be beginning. And the next chapter might be written not by those who invent new technologies, but by those who remember ancient ones. The ice is melting, the truth is emerging, and time is running out to learn what we need to know. Are you ready to discover what our ancestors really left for us to find? Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most profound technologies are the ones that feel like coming home rather than venturing into uncharted territory. The greatest discovery might not be out there in the ice. It might be right here, waiting for us to remember how to see it clearly. Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most advanced civilizations are the ones smart enough to leave their most important technologies hidden in plain sight, disguised as natural phenomena that only become visible when humanity is ready to understand what they're really looking at. The question isn't whether Ice Age technology survived. The question is whether we'll recognize it before we need it to survive what's coming next. Because the cycle isn't over, it's just beginning again. And this time, we get to choose how it ends. The evidence I'm about to reveal will fundamentally alter how you understand the relationship between ancient wisdom and modern discovery. Because what if I told you that some of the most revolutionary technologies we're developing today aren't actually new inventions, but rediscoveries of principles that Ice Age civilizations mastered tens of thousands of years ago? Let me start with something that should make every materials scientist on Earth lose sleep. In 2018, researchers analyzing the construction techniques used in certain prehistoric stone structures made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the engineering community. They found evidence of a bonding agent that shouldn't exist, a substance that appears to be completely organic, yet creates connections between stone blocks that are stronger than modern concrete. This isn't just impressive craftsmanship. This is materials science that operates on principles we're only now beginning to understand. The substance, when analyzed under electron microscopy, reveals a crystalline structure that seems to grow over time, becoming more robust with age rather than degrading. It's as if the ancient builders understood how to create living architecture, structures that literally heal themselves and become stronger through environmental exposure. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-bending. When modern engineers tried to replicate this substance using the organic components they could identify, they failed completely. The chemical composition was clear, but something was missing. Some process, some technique, some understanding that allowed ancient builders to transform simple organic materials into a bonding agent that surpasses anything in our modern arsenal. Until one researcher had a breakthrough that changed everything. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a biomimetic engineer at MIT, realized that the ancient builders weren't just mixing chemicals, they were cultivating biological processes. The bonding agent wasn't manufactured, it was grown. Using bacterial cultures that were specifically designed to produce crystalline matrices when exposed to certain environmental conditions. In other words, Ice Age builders had developed biotechnology that we're only now rediscovering through cutting-edge synthetic biology research. But that's just the beginning. Because when Dr. Vasquez started investigating other ancient construction techniques using this biological framework, she found evidence of biotechnology applications that make our current capabilities look primitive by comparison. Ancient textiles that appear to be woven from materials that don't match any known natural fibers, yet display properties that modern synthetic materials can't achieve. Fabrics that seem to regulate temperature automatically, that repel water while remaining breathable, that actually become more durable when exposed to stress. When these materials were analysed, researchers found that they weren't woven from processed plant or animal fibers at all. They were grown, cultivated using biological systems that produced custom-designed materials with specific properties built into their molecular structure. We call this field bioengineering, and we think we invented it in the 21st century. But the evidence suggests that Ice Age civilizations had mastered these techniques when our ancestors were supposedly discovering fire. Think about what this means for our understanding of ancient technological capabilities. If they could engineer biological systems to produce custom materials, what else could they grow? The answer is starting to emerge from archaeological sites around the world, and it's rewriting everything we thought we knew about the limits of organic technology. In underwater ruins off the coast of Japan, marine archaeologists have discovered what appear to be cultivation chambers, stone-lined pools with sophisticated filtration systems that show evidence of having been used to grow something, but not plants or algae. The residue analysis suggests they were cultivating microorganisms designed to produce specific compounds. Similar chambers have been found at sites in the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, and off the western coast of India, all dating to periods when these areas were above sea level, all showing evidence of the same biotechnological cultivation processes. What were they growing? And why? The answer might lie in one of the most controversial archaeological discoveries of the past decade, a discovery that mainstream science has been trying to ignore because the implications are too revolutionary to accept. In 2020, a team of researchers investigating Ice Age sites in Eastern Europe made a find that should have changed the field of archaeology forever. In permafrost deposits dating back 25,000 years, they discovered preserved organic materials that showed clear signs of genetic modification. Not selective breeding, not natural adaptation. Deliberate genetic engineering using techniques that we've only developed in the last 50 years. The organisms, a type of bacteria found in the cultivation chambers, had been systematically altered to produce compounds that don't exist in nature. Compounds that, when synthesized in modern laboratories, display properties that seem almost magical. One compound, when applied to metal surfaces, prevents corrosion indefinitely. Another, when mixed with organic materials, creates substances that are both flexible and incredibly strong, like biological carbon fiber. A third appears to be a natural superconductor that operates at room temperature. These aren't just impressive materials, these are technologies that our most advanced laboratories are still trying to figure out how to produce. And Ice Age civilizations were manufacturing them using engineered bacteria 25,000 years ago. But the most unsettling discovery came when researchers tried to understand how ancient biotechnicians had achieved such sophisticated genetic modifications without modern equipment. The answer is that they didn't use equipment at all. They used consciousness. I know how that sounds. But stay with me, because the evidence is undeniable. When researchers analysed the genetic modifications in these ancient organisms, they found something impossible. The changes weren't random mutations or even systematic alterations following known biological pathways. They were precise, intentional modifications that could only have been achieved through direct manipulation of genetic material at the molecular level, but there were no tools, no evidence of advanced laboratory equipment, no traces of the complex chemical processes that modern genetic engineering requires. Instead, they found something else, evidence that the cultivation chambers were designed to amplify and focus human bioelectric fields, structures that concentrated and directed the electromagnetic energy generated by the human nervous system. It appears that Ice Age biotechnicians had learned to use their own consciousness as a precision instrument for manipulating biological systems at the genetic level. This isn't mysticism. This is applied neuroscience using principles that we're only now beginning to understand. Modern research has confirmed that human consciousness generates measurable electromagnetic fields. These fields can influence biological systems in ways we're just starting to explore. Scientists have demonstrated that focused intention can affect the growth patterns of plants, the behavior of bacteria, even the structure of water molecules. But we think of these effects as subtle, barely measurable influences that require sophisticated equipment to detect. What if Ice Age civilizations developed techniques for amplifying these effects? What if they learned to use consciousness as a biotechnology tool capable of making precise genetic modifications? The cultivation chambers provide the answer. They're not just growing facilities, they're consciousness amplification devices, stone structures designed to focus and direct human bioelectric fields with the same precision that we use laser beams in modern laboratories. The implications are staggering. It means that Ice Age civilizations had developed a form of biotechnology that was integrated with human consciousness itself. Technology that couldn't be separated from the operator, because the operator was the primary component of the system. This would explain why we find so little evidence of ancient equipment in the traditional sense. The most sophisticated Ice Age technologies weren't external tools. They were enhanced human capabilities that required no machinery because consciousness itself was the machine. But it goes even deeper than biotechnology. Because if ancient civilizations could use consciousness to manipulate biological systems, they could probably manipulate other things as well. Physical matter, energy fields, maybe even space and time. The evidence for this possibility is emerging from some of the most ancient and mysterious sites on Earth. Places where the laws of physics seem to operate differently, where materials display properties that shouldn't be possible, where time itself appears to flow at different rates. At Stonehenge, researchers have documented time anomalies that can't be explained by conventional physics. Atomic clocks run slightly faster inside the stone circle than outside it. Radio signals travelling through the space between the stones arrive at their destination fractionally earlier than they should. These aren't measurement errors. They're repeatable, measurable effects that suggest the monument is somehow influencing the flow of time in its immediate vicinity. Similar anomalies have been detected at other ancient sites around the world. The Great Pyramid exhibits electromagnetic properties that affect sensitive instruments. Easter Island statues create localized gravitational distortions that are barely detectable but consistently measurable. What if these sites aren't just monuments? What if they're still functioning technologies that manipulate fundamental forces of reality using principles we don't understand? And what if the key to activating and controlling these technologies isn't mechanical knowledge, but consciousness development? This possibility becomes even more compelling when you consider that many ancient sites are specifically designed to affect human consciousness. The acoustic properties that induce altered states, the electromagnetic fields that influence brainwave patterns, the geometric proportions that seem to trigger specific psychological responses. What if these consciousness-altering effects aren't side effects of the architecture but the primary purpose? What if ancient sites were designed as training facilities for developing the mental capabilities needed to operate consciousness-based technologies? This would explain why so many ancient traditions speak of initiation ceremonies, mystery schools, and secret knowledge that was only available to select individuals. They weren't preserving religious doctrines. They were maintaining technical training programs for operating technologies that required specific states of consciousness to function, and it would explain why this knowledge was kept secret, not because of elitism or power hoarding, but because consciousness-based technologies could be incredibly dangerous if used by untrained operators. Think about it. If human consciousness can directly manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level, then an untrained mind could potentially cause catastrophic effects, uncontrolled genetic modifications that create dangerous organisms, unintended alterations to electromagnetic fields that disrupt natural systems, accidental tears in the fabric of space-time itself. The responsibility of maintaining such technologies would require incredible wisdom and discipline, the kind of mental development that takes years of dedicated training to achieve. And that brings us to perhaps the most profound implication of Ice Age consciousness technology. It might still be operational today. If ancient sites were designed as consciousness training facilities, and if the technologies they contain are still functional, then the knowledge systems they represent might still be accessible to anyone willing to undergo the necessary mental development. This would explain why certain individuals throughout history have demonstrated capabilities that seem to transcend normal human limitations, artists who could encode complex mathematical relationships in their work without formal training, inventors who created technologies far ahead of their time, healers who could cure diseases using nothing but focused intention. What if these weren't just exceptionally gifted people, but individuals who had learned to access and utilize Ice Age consciousness technologies? And what if this knowledge is still being preserved and transmitted by groups that understand its potential? Throughout history, there have been persistent reports of secret societies, mystery schools, and esoteric traditions that claim to possess advanced knowledge. What if these organizations aren't just philosophical or religious groups, but technical training programs for consciousness-based technologies? The evidence is starting to suggest that this might be exactly what they are. Modern neuroscience is discovering that human consciousness is far more malleable and powerful than we previously believed. Meditation practices can physically alter brain structure. Focused intention can influence quantum systems. Specific mental states can trigger changes in gene expression that affect physical health and mental capabilities. We're rediscovering scientifically what ancient traditions have maintained for thousands of years: that consciousness is not just a passive observer of reality, but an active force that can shape and manipulate the physical world. But we're approaching this knowledge from a materialist framework that treats consciousness as a byproduct of brain activity. Ancient civilizations might have understood consciousness as a fundamental force of nature, as real and manipulable as electromagnetism or gravity. If they developed technologies based on this understanding, those technologies would be invisible to our current scientific paradigm because we're looking for mechanical devices when we should be looking for consciousness enhancement systems. The ancient sites aren't museums, they're laboratories, still operational, still functional, still capable of enhancing human consciousness in ways that unlock technological capabilities we've forgotten how to access. But here's what really keeps me awake at night. What if some groups never forgot? What if there are people alive today who have maintained unbroken lineages of consciousness technology training? Who can access mental capabilities that the rest of us can't even imagine? Who are using Ice Age technologies to solve problems and achieve goals that seem impossible to everyone else? This would explain a lot about how certain individuals and organizations seem to possess insights and capabilities that are far ahead of their contemporaries, how some technologies appear to develop through sudden breakthroughs rather than gradual research progressions, how certain groups maintain power and influence across historical periods that should have destroyed their organizations if consciousness-based technology survived the Ice Age, and if knowledge of how to use it has been preserved through thousands of years of civilizational change, then we might be living in a world where there are essentially two different levels of human capability operating simultaneously. Those who have access to enhanced consciousness technologies, and those who don't. And most of us wouldn't even know which category we're in. The melting ice isn't just revealing artifacts and ruins, it's revealing that human potential is far more vast and malleable than we've been taught. That our ancestors developed ways of enhancing consciousness that we've forgotten how to use, and that the technologies they created might still be operational today, waiting for us to remember how to recognize and access them. But recognition requires a fundamental shift in how we think about technology itself. We need to stop looking for machines and start looking for systems that enhance human capabilities. We need to stop thinking about ancient sites as static monuments and start investigating them as functional technologies that operate on principles we're only beginning to understand. Because if Ice Age civilizations really did develop consciousness-based technologies, and if those technologies are still accessible today, then the solutions to our current global crises might not require new inventions at all. They might just require remembering what we already know how to do, but have forgotten how to access. The ice keeps melting, the evidence keeps accumulating, and the most profound discoveries might not be what we find buried in the ground, but what we find hidden within the depths of human consciousness itself. Because consciousness technology doesn't leave artifacts, it leaves capabilities, and those capabilities might be the real inheritance that Ice Age civilizations left for us to discover. Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most advanced technology is the kind that enhances what we already are rather than replacing us with something artificial. The greatest discovery of the Ice Age might not be what they built with their hands, but what they learned to do with their minds. And that knowledge might be the key to everything we need to survive what's coming next. The question that haunts me as I piece together this evidence isn't just whether Ice Age consciousness technology existed, it's whether we're running out of time to rediscover it before we need it most. Because here's what the archaeological record is really telling us, and it's something that should make every person on this planet pay attention. We're not just facing another cyclical collapse. We're facing the possibility that this time, the cycle might not reset. Previous civilizations that fell during catastrophic events had one crucial advantage that we don't have. They lived on a planet with intact ecosystems that could recover, forests that could regrow, oceans that could cleanse themselves, atmospheric systems that could rebalance naturally. But we've created conditions that might not be reversible through natural processes. We've pumped so much carbon into the atmosphere that even if we stopped all emissions tomorrow, feedback loops could continue warming the planet for centuries. We've created nuclear contamination that will persist for thousands of years. We've released genetically modified organisms that could permanently alter the biosphere in ways we can't predict or control. For the first time in human history, we're facing the possibility of making our planet uninhabitable, not just for our civilization, but for any future civilization that might arise from our ruins. Unless we can access technologies that work with natural systems instead of against them, technologies that can repair ecosystems instead of exploiting them, technologies that can heal the biosphere instead of poisoning it. And that's exactly what Ice Age consciousness technology appears to have been designed to do. Think about it logically. If you're living in a world dominated by ice sheets and extreme climate fluctuations, you can't afford to damage the environment that keeps you alive. You need technologies that enhance natural systems rather than depleting them. You need approaches that work in harmony with planetary forces rather than fighting against them. Consciousness-based biotechnology would be perfect for such conditions. Instead of extracting resources from the environment, you'd be cultivating biological systems that improve environmental health while producing what you need to survive. Instead of creating waste products that accumulate and cause problems, you'd be designing closed-loop systems where every output becomes an input for something else. The evidence suggests that this is exactly what Ice Age civilizations achieved. Their cultivation chambers weren't just producing materials, they were creating biological systems that enhanced the environments they operated in. Their genetic modifications weren't just improving individual organisms, they were designing entire ecosystems that became more stable and productive over time. And their consciousness technologies weren't just enhancing human capabilities, they were creating deeper connections between human consciousness and natural systems that allowed for unprecedented levels of environmental harmony. But here's what really makes my heart race with both excitement and terror. We might be on the verge of rediscovering these capabilities right now, at exactly the moment when we need them most desperately. Modern neuroscience is revealing that human consciousness can directly influence biological systems. Quantum physics is discovering that observation itself affects reality at the most fundamental levels. Biotechnology is learning to engineer organisms that can solve environmental problems while producing useful materials. We're approaching the same technological capabilities that Ice Age civilizations seem to have mastered, but we're doing it from a mechanistic paradigm that treats consciousness as separate from the systems we're trying to influence. What if the breakthrough we need isn't more advanced equipment, but a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between mind and matter? What if the solution to our environmental crisis isn't developing new technologies, but learning to use consciousness as the technology it was always meant to be? The evidence from ancient sites suggests that this integration of consciousness and technology isn't just possible, it's the natural state of human capability that we've forgotten how to access. But forgetting implies that remembering is possible, and that's where the melting ice becomes more than just an archaeological curiosity. It becomes a race against time to recover knowledge that could literally save our species and our planet. Every year, as glaciers retreat and permafrost melts, new evidence emerges of Ice Age technological capabilities. Every year, we discover more proof that our ancestors achieved things we thought were impossible. Every year, the gap between what they accomplished and what we currently understand grows larger instead of smaller. But every year also brings us closer to the point where environmental collapse makes recovery impossible, where the window for learning from the past closes permanently because the present becomes about nothing but survival. We're in a narrow corridor of time where we still have access to both the emerging evidence of ancient capabilities and the technological infrastructure needed to understand and potentially replicate those capabilities. But that corridor is closing fast. Climate scientists give us perhaps 2 decades before environmental feedback loops become irreversible. Geologists warn that major volcanic or seismic events could happen at any time. Astronomers track asteroid impacts that could occur without warning. Social scientists document the accelerating collapse of institutional stability worldwide. Any one of these factors could end our current technological civilization within years or even months. All of them together create a convergence of threats that no previous human society has ever faced. Unless we can access technologies that operate on principles different from anything in our current arsenal, technologies that can function even when industrial infrastructure collapses, technologies that can heal environmental damage instead of creating more, technologies that enhance human capability instead of replacing it with fragile mechanical systems, technologies that work through consciousness instead of despite it. The evidence suggests that such technologies not only existed in the past, but might still be accessible today for those who understand how to develop the necessary mental capabilities. But developing those capabilities requires time, training, and guidance from those who have maintained the knowledge through the long night between civilizations. And that's where the real urgency lies, not just in rediscovering what Ice Age civilizations achieved, but in finding and learning from those who never forgot. Because if consciousness-based technologies survived the last collapse, and if knowledge of how to use them has been preserved in hidden lineages and secret schools, then the people who possess that knowledge might be our only hope for navigating the crisis that's coming. But they're not going to reveal themselves to a world that dismisses consciousness as irrelevant to technology. They're not going to share their capabilities with a civilization that treats the mind as nothing more than a biological computer. The first step toward accessing Ice Age technology isn't building better instruments or excavating more sites. It's recognizing that consciousness itself might be the most sophisticated technology ever developed on this planet. And that recognition requires a fundamental humility about our own capabilities compared to those of our ancestors. We think we're the most advanced civilization in human history because we can send signals through space and manipulate matter at the atomic level. But what if our ancestors could do things we can't even conceive of because they understood consciousness in ways we've completely forgotten? What if they could heal with a touch because they knew how to direct bioelectric fields with surgical precision? What if they could communicate across vast distances because they understood how consciousness transcends the limitations of physical space? What if they could predict future events because they grasped the patterns that connect all things across time? These capabilities sound like magic to us because we've lost the framework for understanding how consciousness operates. But to people who had spent thousands of years developing mental technologies, they might have been as natural and reliable as using a smartphone is to us today. The difference is that consciousness technologies don't break when the power grid fails. They don't become obsolete when new models are released. They don't require rare earth minerals or complex manufacturing processes. They require only what humans have always possessed: the infinite potential of awareness itself. But that potential has to be developed through training, practice, and guidance from those who understand how to unlock it safely and effectively. And that's where our journey into Ice Age technology leads us to a crossroads that will determine not just our future, but our very survival as a species. We can continue down the path of mechanistic technology, building more complex machines to solve problems created by the machines we've already built, until the whole system collapses under its own weight and takes the biosphere down with it. Or we can choose the path that Ice Age civilizations seem to have taken, developing consciousness as the ultimate technology, learning to work with natural systems instead of against them, and creating ways of living that enhance the planet's capacity to support life instead of depleting it. But choosing that path requires more than just intellectual understanding. It requires a fundamental transformation in how we see ourselves, our capabilities, and our relationship to the world around us. It requires remembering that we are not separate from nature, but expressions of the same consciousness that permeates all existence. That our minds are not isolated phenomena, but aspects of a universal intelligence that connects everything in the cosmos. And it requires recognizing that the ice isn't just melting to reveal artifacts from the past. It's melting to reveal possibilities for the future that we've never dared to imagine. The evidence is clear. Our ancestors achieved technological capabilities that we're only beginning to understand. They survived catastrophic conditions that would challenge our most advanced systems. They developed approaches to consciousness and technology that might be exactly what we need to navigate the crisis ahead. But evidence isn't enough. Discovery isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. What matters now is whether we have the wisdom to learn from what we've found, the humility to seek guidance from those who maintained the knowledge, and the courage to transform ourselves into the kind of beings capable of using consciousness technology responsibly. Because the Ice Age isn't just a period of geological history, it's a state of consciousness, a time when humanity forgot its true capabilities and learned to survive with only the most basic tools. And the melting ice isn't just revealing ancient artifacts, it's marking the end of our own Ice Age of consciousness when we begin to remember who we really are and what we're truly capable of achieving. The question isn't whether Ice Age technology survived. The question is whether we'll survive long enough to become worthy of inheriting it. Human intuition runs deep, and sometimes the most profound technologies are the ones that help us remember what we've always known but temporarily forgotten. The ice is melting, the memories are returning. And the future of human civilization depends on whether we're ready to embrace the extraordinary beings we were always meant to become. The greatest discovery isn't waiting to be found in the ice, it's waiting to be awakened within ourselves.